So firstly, from our first meeting when we spoke to you, we understood that there was a lack of locally relevant literature, and you mentioned especially in export, but in a lot of areas. So from there, we sort of developed a research problem, which was trying to address one of these issues, and the issue that we chose was exporting dairy products from the Jönköping region to Finland, to make it a little bit more specific. The theoretical framework that we've used is the four main P's of marketing. So your product, your pricing, placement, and promotion. Because it's such a long-standing theory, even though there's P's are added and taken off all the time, the main four seem to stay. And we think for someone that may be unfamiliar with marketing, like a farmer that you're giving the report directly to, it might be the easiest way to divide it up. And as far as our method, we've just divided up each section and then tried to provide relevant examples or statistic or any literature sources to sort of back up our opinions or recommendations. And so we've done that by addressing each one separately, discussing the positives and negatives of different options, and then providing a recommendation based on that for a Jönköping dairy producer looking at export to Finland. Challenges, I think the ones that we experienced most was choosing a topic, as we were discussing before, because there's so many. And also, a lot of things like this, you need the data from the specific producer to give an educated opinion on what they should do. So we need to meet the farmer and know exactly how much profit they make, exactly how much sales, for us to give them a calculation, actually estimate costs, actually estimate price. So it was a challenge making it useful but still superficial enough that it's still relevant to a range of dairy producers. I'm Joseph, and so marketing essentially is, even though people see it as only the advertising part of selling a product, it's actually a whole lot more, and that's why we've thought it particularly useful to structure the report in what to do with the product, what to do with your price, what to do with your promotion. Now, even though we have only used examples for dairy producers in the Jönköping region exporting to Finland, we think that a lot of the recommendations and the systems that we've used could be applied to farmers of other products looking to export to other Nordic countries, just because it's this considerations are very similar, even though the examples vary. So essentially, a product is any tangible thing that you receive often when you give somebody money. But for the purposes of this report, we'll be assuming that product is just your standard dairy product, something like milk or cheese, as I said before, from the Jönköping region, from a local producer, and we're assuming that their objective is that they want to export overseas for profit. So we're basing a lot of the report on that assumption. The first thing that we think will need to be considered is varying tastes across borders. So that's one of the most specific, taste is regionally specific, and one of the most regionally specific products in the world. So, for example, in Sweden they like Audis, and in Germany they like Audis, but in Sweden they like herring, and in Germany they're not crazy, so they don't really like herring over there. So that's one of the most important things to consider for local producers, that if they want to export to Finland, they have to make sure that it's adapted to suit the Finnish market. But because Finland and Sweden are similar in a lot of ways, they might not need it adapted as much as if they were looking at exporting to other regions. So that will be for them to determine individually, but it's definitely a consideration for food products. Secondly, food safety laws and standards. So even though Finland and Sweden are both EU, so there's a lot of laws that are the same across the borders, there's also different national laws. So just an example, Finland is a lot stricter on salmonella testing and regulation. I think Sweden's quite similar, but it's different to the EU regulations, so that's important for farmers to seek personalised legal advice before they export, just to make sure that they're not selling a product illegally or doing anything wrong, which is a lot easier to do, especially on the small to medium business scale where there's not as many checks and balances. Finally, labelling, packaging, and consumer tastes. So similarly to food, like what people associate with colours, what people associate with different logos, words, varies between countries and between languages. And that means that when packaging a product, it's really important for producers to take that into account. Also, Finland has Swedish and Finnish both as national languages, so packaging will need to be done in both Finnish and Swedish. And we recommend that they hire someone who understands the local business climate and can translate effectively so that they're complying with the labelling regulation. Also, the labelling and packaging, that applies to any any exporter for any country. Like, you generally have to change language, or at least look what's considered okay in the local culture, or people like in the local culture, to make sure that you're not labelling incorrectly and make your product more successful. Perfect. So that's all for me.
Yeah, my name is Adilhan, but everybody knows me here as Eddie. And I was responsible for the pricing part, which is like one of the most essential parts and the parts which businesses and farmers are most concerned about. And I tried to give the pricing advisory based on a theoretical background. So using the 4-step process, which consists of the first step, set the pricing goals. The second one is estimate demand and cost. The third one is select a pricing strategy to aid the establishment of a base price. And the fourth one is making the adjustments to the base price utilizing pricing tactics. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about pricing objectives. And just want to note that it's up to the companies to decide what pricing objective they want to undertake, as different businesses and farmers have different organizational objectives, so they gotta align with the pricing objectives. So I just want to briefly talk about the objectives that actually exist and give a concise definition of what they are. So the first one is profit-oriented pricing objective, which means that it seeks basically companies seek to charge the prices as much as possible to get a maximum profit, but in a reasonable way. Then the next one is sales-oriented pricing objective, which seeks to gain a huge market share or either maximize the sales. And the third one is status quo pricing strategy or objective, which basically maintains the existing prices or companies try to match up to the competitors' ones. Okay, we go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about the demand, and the study showed that the demand in the Finnish dairy market is very high. In fact, the average Finn drinks approximately 130 liters of only milk per year, and I guess this picture is kind of relevant to that fact. So, but where's the high demand, there is also a huge supply. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that there is a number of local producers operating in the Finnish market, but the dominant players are definitely Valio, Arla, and Satamaito. And want to note that Valio and Satamaito are Finnish-based companies, while Arla is based in Denmark. Yeah, but the more competitive dairy market has become, the more sophisticated the consumers has come to be. So if we go to the next slide, the Finns, they constantly seek for the different variations of dairy products, which have either the unique taste features or health properties, or both. And so the bright examples of that would be the lactose-free milk or cheeses and yogurts with different flavors, or dairy with low sugar content. So that's what typically the Finnish consumers look for. So the farmers, they gotta focus on the competitive advantage and building the competitive advantage. So besides supplying the products that will have the different taste features and health properties, they should also focus on the advantages such as organic origin and eco-friendly production, because Finnish people are really concerned about the impact the food production makes on the environment. So that could be stressing that they obtain the eco-friendly production could raise the value of the products that they sell. It basically, these competitive advantages, they enable the farmers to compete with domestic producers. But if farmers don't know whether they're obtain the organic origin or whether their production is eco-friendly, they can use the service of the Hushållningssällskapet. Yeah, right. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about costs. So Sweden and Finland are both EU countries, so there's no custom duties between them because there is a rule of free movement of goods. Usually there is no storing, delivery, or insurance costs because, yeah, sure.
Why is no storing?
Like no storing, like why no storing?
Yeah.
Well, basically, of the report which was issued by the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of Finland, they pointed out that the Finns like to take responsibilities on external costs. The external costs, like storing in the warehouse, they also like sort of take on it, and they let the basically the producers to bear with the only with the cost of production. So other costs are administered by the importers. But it's not. I actually highlighted usually because it's not always the case, and it's always subject to the agreement between the importer and exporter. But usually Finnish people and Finnish importers, they like administering all the external costs by themselves because they can do it efficiently. They think they can do it efficiently. Usually no VAT costs, but again, I highlighted usually because there may be cases when the business or company operates in an EU country, but it's not registered as a VAT business, then it may be a subject of charging the VAT to the product, which raises the cost of the product. If we go to the next slide, we go to the third step, the pricing strategy. So basically, yeah, I didn't mention it in the slide, but we highly recommend to use the status quo pricing strategy. So again, just to remind you, the status quo pricing strategy means to maintain the prices on the same level as competitors. And the reason why we recommend it because the farmers may not differentiate from the competitors in terms of prices, but they also can have the competitive advantages over them. So in terms of prices, they're equal, but in terms of obtaining the competitive advantages, they're more dominant. Basically, it's also these pricing strategies, the status quo pricing strategy, is utilized by companies who do not have unique products. And we can claim that the milk or cheese or yogurts, they fall into this category. Yeah. And if we go to the next slide, this is the last step, adjustment tactics. So these common tactics, they include either imposing the sales or discounts on the product, or exploiting peculiar demand situations, or just attaining the promotional and positioning objectives. But it's done. This step is undertaken only after the introduction of the products to the market. So we highly recommend the farmers to first introduce the products and then analyze the demand situation, just the market situation, and how the products are sold in that market. And based on the conclusions of that analysis, adjust their base price to like making it higher or making it lower. Yeah. That's it for the pricing strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Gloria, and I had the promotion part in the report. I would start by saying that we gave a definition of what promotion is like in the report as any activity that a person or a producer or a business does to create awareness for their product. So the idea is that since you're going into a new market, you have to create awareness for your products. That is not just at the shop and then when I go and I'm aware of it, then it's easier for me to go and get it. We wrote about some recommendations, strategies that the farmers can look at when they want to advertise their product or promote their product. And first off, I started with talking about advertising. Advertising is costly because you have to pay the TV shows, the TV channels. You have to pay the radio, and then maybe billboards and all that. But those are actually very common in Finland. We have the TV, and then transportation venues are actually very common to advertise, because then you can hang flyers and you can hang in the trains or the bus stops, or as we do here in Sweden, so you can see all the new products or the new things that are coming up. Though they can be very expensive depending on which type you use. But then we wrote that it's a recommendation to have a mixture of it. So you don't have to just do TV, you can do the advertising at the venues, the transportation venues at the same time you're doing something like the billboard or the newspaper. So that's it. And then, but one thing that we started with advertising is that you want to know who you are advertising for, who is your target market, who are you trying to sell your product to. So if you want to advertise, it's always good to know who is going to buy my product. And for the dairy products, it's very easy because organizations such as the Finland Food and Safety Authority and Dairy Nutrition Council in Finland, they stress and advise that people drink milk and take other dairy products. So the health aspect becomes an advantage when you're advertising. So you use that from that perspective, and then it draws attention. So I found out that there are food trade fairs in Sweden and Finland that you can go and display your products and just and I thought that was a very good start for new products into the market, because the food trade fairs, I found one was called Turku Food and Wine Trade Fair, and the other was Messukuskes. I think it's in the it's a Finnish word, but it's in the report. Yeah. And then we have a link that you can contact them, and on their pages they have information about how to contact them, and if you are far, you can just mail them or call them. So that I thought was a very good start for especially farmers from Sweden that are going to Finland. So because then it brings like chefs and food bloggers and food writers, and when they come there, they are there because they have no commitments to the people that are displaying their products. So their views give publicity to the products one way or another. So, and then the chefs actually can start to buy from you if they find that your product is good and eco-friendly, like Eddie was saying. So those things attract, which I super recommend that trade fairs should be like how to start and how to get publicity to your product. But then the advertisement is more like going through common channels that we all are used to, the internet, the TVs and the radios, and even though they are more costly, but the trade fairs are cheaper. So if you start from there, you get to straight away you get a bit of publicity from either the chefs or the bloggers or the food writers.
Yeah, trade shows are really interesting, and actually we're gonna have it in the project to go to different trade shows.
Okay.
But we haven't checked out any Finnish trade shows, so that would be really interesting to check out them. And we haven't thought about like this. Food bloggers and food writers as a target group. We only thought about chefs actually. Okay. So that's gonna shift maybe our focus a bit regarding trade shows. Yes,
because the food bloggers and the food writers, when they're usually famous. Especially, I saw that the Turku Food and Wine Fair, they write specifically that it's just for professionals those who want to come there to come and see. So it's a good place to start. If you get in, then it's a good start for you. And then some famous chef in Finland can write about you, and then you can get a good publicity from there.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, and I'm Cynthia, and I'm taking the placement part. Before I begin, I'm going to define the meaning of placement, which is the pipeline through which producers transport their products to the market. And there are various channels through which producers can use to transport this product. And the first one is talking about the direct channel. As you can see in the diagram here, it shows directly from the manufacturer to the customer, which means that in this case, the producer directly sells to the customer. It does not need to pass through any middleman. And this mostly, we are talking about export. So basically, it's not going to work for now since the manufacturers are here in Sweden and they are going to transport to Finland. So it's going to be somewhere in the future when they are planning to expand and then have their plants in Finland. Then they can decide on this channel to sell directly to the customers. The second one is the retailer, and this is also when the manufacturer, channels the product to the retailer, and then the retailer takes the product to the end customer. And this is, okay, let's talk about the next one, which is also the wholesalers. And at this point, the manufacturer sends to the wholesaler, and then the wholesaler takes over to the retailer, and retailer sends to the consumers. And with the wholesalers, the manufacturer does not have any ownership at this point when the goods are being transported to the wholesalers. The wholesaler takes over everything, the ownership of it. So if the wholesaler is able to distribute these products to the retailers as fast as possible, then it brings value on the product. So here it's very important if the manufacturer is able to find an efficient wholesaler, then it's going to help him or her in the firm in their products. And we have the agents or brokers, and these are also firms who they link the wholesalers and then the retailers. So it's basically for firms that are smaller. They have limited funds. They are not able to go as big as any bigger organization. So in this case, the agent comes in and help them in how they are going to contact each other to distribute their products. And the conclusion part is it's very important for the manufacturer to be able to to decide how best they want to use any of these channels, and this is really going to help them in there.
Yeah, just want to add that mostly the Finnish importers, right? They really keen on cutting out the external expenses. So basically, the first two channels, they're the most preferable for importers. So if we're talking about from manufacturer to consumers, then we can actually take the example of trade fairs. But for most of the time, it will be from manufacturer to retailer, which would be the supermarkets, who would then introduce the products to the final consumers. Yeah.
So you're suggesting one of the top or two?
Yeah.
Either the direct or the retailers.
I'm just thinking how that would work. Let's say that we have a truck with
products, right?
Slab, trailer,
okay.
Truck with a trailer, and go over to Finland from here, and then go straight to the consumers.
That's why I was probably the only example, because as you said, farmers as you said before, the farmers are reluctant to go by themselves to sell the products. So the second channel would be the most used one, but the first one really exemplifies the usage of the fairs, trade fairs, where the farmers can directly introduce their products to the final consumers. These channels, they were just Cynthia pointed out all the channels just to basically so that the farmers could get aware of possible sort of opportunities to distribute their products. But as I said, the most used channel would be the second one.
Yeah, and I think this image is really good to have when talking to farmers because
it's
this is gonna explain like how they're gonna do business. I mean, go over with the details pre-packed for consumers or pre-packed for a wholesaler. That's gonna be two different outlays of the whole operation. So this is a very central part.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking before, I would rather consider the two later ones with a wholesaler involved. Even though it's a less margin, it's going to be simpler to start with. But of course, it's going to be a higher margin with if you could go straight to the retailers.
But then you gotta take into account the competitors, because if you use the wholesaler, that means that you increase the margin. That means you increase the cost of the product. So you will have double margins.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation.
Yeah, it is.
But it's worth thinking about. So it's a real good picture to widen the topic.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jen.
My name is Eugenia, but I'm also known as Jane. And I want to mention some key points that we mentioned before with my group mates. First of all, without a good timing, without a good marketing strategy, your company can risk to be lost among other similar manufacturers. So what we say to you, expansion to Finland is one of the key elements of your development, and it will be very helpful for you to increase profit, increase your
market share.
Yeah, market shares. Thank you. And so before expansion, we advise you for it's also estimation. We advise you 4 main steps to do. So first of all, you consider your product should it be suited to special international standards, some kind of examples that we made before. Then determine pricing goals. Determine what is your main demand, what your cost and your profit, what you expect from the company, expect from the market to be done. Third, you need to decide the right promotion strategy, as we mentioned before. Promotion is one of the most important things to do before going to market, and how it effectively penetrates your product to target market. And the last one, you need to choose distribution channel among price, among promotion, among people, among all that stuff that we mentioned, that you wish to have, you wish to utilize. And lastly, it's just an advice. You decide everything. Everything we did is up to you. But all the sources we cited, all the things we mentioned is a big advice for you to follow from us.